Hello.
Hello, namaste.
Namaste sir.
Namaste, namaste.
सुनिन्छ होला we're all set.
एकदम ठिक छ।
राम्रो। अनि त्यसो भए अहिले तिलक भाइ आउनुभयो अनि श्याम भाइ आउनुभयो हैन अनि रूपक जी हुनुहुन्छ हैन त?
हजुर सर हजुर।
नमस्ते। ल हाम्रो you are the lifeline, you'll have to tell us how we are doing.
ठिकै छ सर। अब अहिले चाहिँ उता एटेन्डिन्समा चाहिँ 8 जना हुनुहुन्छ हैन। म हजुरलाई कोस्ट बनाइन्छु। हजुरले कसैलाई चाहिँ प्यानलमा तान्न चाहनुहुन्छ भने उहाँलाई तान्न सक्नुहुन्छ हैन।
ए ठीक छ। हाम्रो स्ट्यान्डर्ड मान्छे तपाईलाई थाहा छँदैछ हामी 6 जना हैन।
हजुर।
अनि तपाई हुनुभयो, सत्य भाइ चाहिँ आउन सक्दैन भन्नुभएको छ।
हजुर।
अनि यसमा हामीलाई आएको क्वेशन चाहिँ तपाईले हामीलाई फरवर्ड गर्नुहुन्छ कि कसरी हुन्छ? अब यो क्वेशनहरु आयो भने चाहिँ
यस्तो हुन्छ सर। अब यो यहाँ चाहिँ Q&A भन्ने एउटा हुन्छ, अप्सन हुन्छ। अनि यो एटेन्डिजहरुले चाहिँ क्वेशन एक्स गर्नलाई चाहिँ हजुरहरुलाई त्यसबाट गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ। प्लस अब हामी चाहिँ एनआरएन अफिसियल र एनसीसी युएसए अनि साथै अन्य मिडियाहरुमा हाम्रो जुन सर्कलमा भएको मिडियाहरुमा चाहिँ हामी लाइभ जान्छौं। त्यसबाट नि केही क्वेशनहरु आइरा हुन सक्छ। हजुरहरुले त्यो कमेन्टर गर्नु होला। म हजुरलाई एनआरएन अफिसियलको चाहिँ लिंक दिन्छु हैन। लाइभ गएपछि हामी हाम्रो प्रोग्राम चाहिँ 10:30 मा छ। हामी ठ्याक्कै टाइममा छ। अब के गर्छौं हामी? कुर्छौं कि के गर्छौं सर?
10:30 मा चाहिँ बाँकी छ 2-3 मिनेट हैन?
हैन 10:30 भइसक्यो हैन?
ए हाम्रो 1-2 जना साथीहरु जोइन गर्न बाँकी छ।
ओके राज
म उहाँलाई खबर गर्छु।
मलाई चाहिँ मैले यता थाल्ने हाम्रो ए भन्ने लेख्नु भएको छ। आकृति विज्ञान सर रेडी भएपछि भन्नु है हजुरले।
ल हुन्छ, एकै मिनेट ल।
हाम्रो एटेन्डीमा कोही हुनुहुन्छ भने जो चाहिँ प्यानलिस्टमा हुनुपर्ने उहाँहरूले ह्यान्ड रेज गर्नु होला है।
के एड्रेस गर्नु होला?
ह्यान्ड रेज गर्नु होला।
ह्यान्ड रेज गर्नु होला। ओके ओके
ओके।
सर हामी रेडी हो लाइभमा जाउँ
एक मिनट है यहाँ हाम्रो एटेन्डीहरू दुईजना डाक्टर साहबहरू एटेन्ड गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ गिभ अस कपल अफ मिनट्स
हाम्रो भर्खर आउनु भएको सर चाहिँ सरको नाम के हो
म चन्द्र चौथ अनि
त्यहाँ 3 जना देखिरहेछ हैन
श्याम चालिसी हुनुहुन्छ तिलक हुनुहुन्छ राजश्री हामी 4 जना छौं
हजुर अनि यो लिंकबाट चाहिँ अरूले नि जोइन गर्नु भएको छ हैन
ए हजुर चटो दाइको
रिनेम
चटो दाइले मलाई लिंक पठाउनु थियो त्यही लिंकमा मैले जोइन गरेको उहाँको नाम आएछ
यसमा वेबिनारमा चाहिँ के हुन्छ भने त्यो चाहिँ सिंगल पर्सनलाई चाहिँ सिंगल लिंक हुन्छ अनि त्यो एउटै नेम दिन्छ हजुरहरुले रिनेम गर्न मिल्छ रिनेम गर्नु न
पक्कै त म रिनेम गर्न मिल्छ जस्तो लाग्छ
अनि हाम्रो अर्को पनि एकजना हुनुहुन्छ उहाँले चाहिँ भिडियो अफ गर्नु भएको छ
भिडियो कसको
ए उहाँ चाहिँ नेपाली सर
प्रकाश नेपाली हो सर म रिनेम गरिदिन्छु है
ल
ठीक छ आर यु अल गुड
या
रूपक भाइ तपाई रेडी हुनुहुन्छ त हाम्रो सबैजना आउनुभयो राजश्री ठीक छ
हामी ठीक छौं सर ठीक छौं म चाहिँ रेडी छु हजुरहरु रेडी भइछु भन्नु म क्लिक गरेर लाइभमा जान्छु है
राजश्री कता हो हेलो राजश्री
हजुरको म्युटमा छ म
राजश्री यु आर म्युट
अनम्युट गर्नु
ल ठीक छ त्यसो भए तपाईले सुरु गर्दा तपाईले कन्ट्रोल गर्नुहुन्छ कि हामी आफै अनम्युट गरौँ त
हैन हजुरले गर्न मिल्छ हजुर चाहिँ प्यानलिस्ट भएपछि चाहिँ हजुरले गर्न मिल्छ
ओके त्यसपछि सबैजना अनम्युट गरौँ तपाईले अनाउन्स गर्नुहोस् म अनि अनम्युट गरेर म सुरु गर्छु आल म्युट इट नाउ
म लाइभ जानलाई उ गर्छु है Sir, we are live.
Namaste. Welcome everyone to our panel discussion, Residency Training Program in the United States, Challenges and Opportunities. My name is Chandra Chatat. I am hospitalist and internist at Chicago Cook County Hospital. So objective of this program is to provide some useful information for our audience, mostly medical students, medical graduates and residents in terms of useful information as well as what are the career opportunities subsequently. So I would like to thank NRNA Health Committee for this opportunity. So let me introduce our distinguished panelists. So Dr. Sam Chalisai, he's a program director of internal medicine residency program, Amita Health St. Joseph Hospital, and he's also assistant professor of Department of University of Illinois, Chicago College of Medicine. Dr. Anil Ghimire, he's a clinical associate professor, University of California, San Francisco, and associate program director, Pulmonary and Critical Care Fellowship, UCSF Fresno, and a medical director of Chronic Lung Disease Program. Then we have Dr. Tilak Joshi. He's an associate program director, hospitalist, internal medicine residency program at Mount Sinai Hospital, Chicago. He's also assistant professor of medicine, Chicago Medical School at Rosalind Franklin University. Then we have Dr. Prakash Neopane. He's associate professor of medicine, director, hematology oncology fellowship, and Dr. Neopane is also director, head and neck medical oncology at University of Kansas Medical Center, Kansas City, Kansas. Then we have Dr. Rajshri Singh. She's a ECFMG certified, and she is an applicant this year. She is a graduate of Nepalese Army Institute of Health Sciences. With this introduction, I would like to state that the main objective of this program is informational, educational, and the ideas expressed by the panelists do not represent to those of their institute or program. They are purely personal opinions. And we have collected a lot of questions from our potential audience on this, and it will be a question and answer format. And as we go, we'll take live questions as time permitted. So I would like to give you some brief background on US residency training. So 1 in 4 US medical doctor is foreign trained, that is international medical graduate. And every year around 12,000 doctors apply for residency training program in the United States from outside America. And according to unofficial data in 2019 alone, nearly 200 Nepali doctors applied for residency. However, the match rate for non-American trained graduates is around 60%. So although there are some opportunities, there are challenges too. So with this background, I would like to invite Dr. Rashi Singh. She is applicant this year to share her story, how she prepared, what challenges she anticipates, and initiate some of the questions for our internal medicine residency program director, Dr. Rashi Singh.
Thank you, Dr. Chatur. Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Rashi Singh, and I would like to share a bit of background about myself. So I'm a first batch graduate of Nepal's Army Institute of Health Sciences, and since we had no seniors or mentors, this panel discussion is a really important session for candidates like me. So I graduated in 2018, and I worked in multiple jobs while I was preparing for USMLE. And I took my step 1 and CK in 2019 and my CS in 2020, and I was ECFM certified by April 2020. And this is my first time applying for the match. So because of the ongoing pandemic, Nepal went into a lockdown, flights were suspended, and embassies closed until the further notice. And usually by this time of the year, most of the applicants would be in the US gearing up for the application and interview season. But this year things look different, with most of the applicants without US clinical experiences, LORs, and applying late into the cycle. So residency training in USA is an important topic for graduates like me who are anxious and confused. So I'm truly grateful to the Health Committee of NRNA and Dr. Chatur to have created this panel decorated with distinguished panelists, and I get to answers to my questions directly from the experts in the field. So I've collected a substantial amount of questions from social media, phone calls, and emails, which I would like to put forward to the panelists here today. So Dr. Chatur, I would like to ask your permission if I could proceed with today's session about the impact of pandemic on the residency application and interview.
Definitely, please proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Chatur. So I'm about to ask some questions pertinent to the pandemic to our panelists here today. So Dr. Chalise, I would like to start with the biggest question of the match 2021, which is that amid the pandemic, how different will be the interview and the residency application season this year?
No, namaste everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Chatur and the entire team for providing me this, this unique opportunity here, and all the participants all here. Welcome to the journey. This is exciting. There are challenges, but you'll be able to do it. So it's an exciting journey. We're all here to help you guide through the process, and good luck for the process. And having said that, going back to your question, Rajshri, these are unprecedented times. These are, difficult times. Nobody has seen this coming. We are basically, there's a lot of uncertainties in a lot of things that we do because of the COVID-19 itself. So, residency application as well as the interview itself will have to go through similar kind of uncertainties. Having said that, my understanding is almost a lot of the training programs will more than likely go for virtual interviews. There may be some hybrid mixed situations where they may be able to get in some candidates from local candidates, but in general, for all practical purposes, I think you have to kind of start preparing yourself for virtual interviews. And if you ask me, what can you do to for the interview itself, you have to make sure that you practice with your friends, with your mentors, record it, watch it, and look at your body language, your eye contact, look at the camera. It's very important, right? And talk slow, clear, and watch your, when I say body language, your posture, your hands are folded or not. All those things are important. But as far as the Zoom, or I mean, virtual interview itself is concerned, few points that I'd like to share is like, you know, optimizing the interview environment, you know, testing the technology beforehand, and proactively removing any potential distractions. Like if you may have your phone, your chat box, or there could be so many distractions. And appearance is everything. Please dress up professionally as if you're, you know, appearing in an in-person interview, and you know, go with the flow. You know, this is going to be a, you know, technical. There could be technical difficulties, but it's okay. Don't panic. You'll have to learn to go with the flow. So, and my answer basically is it's going to be virtual interviews, and you have to prepare yourself. And some of these points might seem very obvious, but you have to be mindful of these facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chalse. That was a really important closure that we needed. Dr. Joshi, would you like to add further into any tips on how we can present ourselves the very best virtually? Because like Dr. Chalse said, it is an uncharted area for all of us.
Yes, first of all, thank you for this invitation in this meeting. Yes, it is uncharted territory for both residency programs and the interviewees. So there are technical aspects that has been addressed a little bit. Whether it is virtual interview or not, you got to have executive presence during the interview. What does that mean? That means you got to have good appearance. The content of communication, the tone of it should be good. You should practice for that. And the gravitas, what you have, should be expressed, because that is how you sell yourself to the programs. So you'd like to have the presence, not just physically, mentally, and all the presence you need to have. And you got to listen to the questions very carefully. Because if the questions are not listened first, then how could you answer correctly? So listening the questions is important, and it could be beneficial to the interviewees too, because you could blame the technical aspects. You could ask, could you repeat it again? Do not just answer if you don't know what is being asked to you. So with this, I would like to tell a small story of Margaret Thatcher. We know, she was prime minister. Before she was prime minister, she was housewife, and after that she was a parliamentarian. In the British Parliament, she was kind of criticized because of her shrill voice. So what she did is she did have a voice coach for many years to improve it. And she's the first female prime minister in England, and everybody knows the name. So we don't have that high bar, but still small things can make a lot of difference. Thank you.
Thank you for your helpful tips, Dr. Joshi. So that concludes my questions about the impact of COVID-19 on this current math season. Now I would like to hand over the mic to Dr. Chotu.
Thank you, Rajshree. So now fellowship is equally important, and a lot of our residents are here, maybe in your program. So my question first to Dr. Neupani and then Dr. Ghimre is, how is fellowship application interview process going to be different this year, even though they are here, but still a lot of changes coming. So Dr. Neupani, can you give us some insight into this, please? Can you unmute your mic, please?
Sorry. The fellowship interviews and residency interviews are not very different in this aspect with COVID, and a lot of it is going to be virtual interviews. We're utilizing the technology, and for the candidates, you just show up your best appearance on the interview, and take it as if you're doing the in-person interview. Candidates are anxious, and so is the programs. As a program director, I'm equally anxious how this interview process is going to go. So it's uncharted territory for everyone. the technology, technical glitch, all of those issues can make a difference. And I had my first interview session yesterday of this interview season, and interviewed 5 candidates with 5 different faculties. So I was able to put together that it went really well. I felt like this was the same in-person interview that I used to do. I try to mimic as much as possible in the organization. It went very well. So if the technology works, it works well, and I still have several interview sessions that, you know, every time I'll be equally anxious that how that day is going to be. So that's about the interview process. So Dr. Chateau, do you want me to go over any other fellowship questions?
I think just by acknowledging that you're equally anxious decreases the applicant's anxiety. Thank you for doing that. So maybe I'll pose the same questions to Dr. Gimire, then I'll come back later. Thank you, Dr. Nepani.
Thank you, Dr. Chateau, and thank you, NRN, for giving me this opportunity to discuss residency and fellowship in US. And most of the important things has been already discussed. As Dr. Nepani said, that this is a two-way process of anxiety-provoking situation on both sides. One thing that I will add is that after you do all those things that previous speaker has said, if you are really interested in a program, make an effort to show your interest by saying that I might want to make a personal visit when things turn out to be fine. And instead of writing a generic email on the computer, it might be worthwhile writing a handwritten letter that shows that special interest. So a handwritten letter to the program and an initiative to show that I want to visit that place personally, that might give you a little bit of a head ahead in terms of other applications. But other than that, I think I agree with most of the things that has been said by previous speakers. Preparation, showing confidence, and believing that you are in front of the people and acting like you are talking in front of people. And sometimes you have to fake it to make it, right? So just fake it that you are in front of the people. So and do your best. So that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you, Dr. Gimre, for that insight. So going back to Dr. Nepani, so because all our fellowship applicants will be in the United States, will you encourage them to visit in person, or in terms of if they approach for in-person visit, what will be your kind of a thinking or strategy on this?
I think that will be to individual programs and their local policies. So currently in my institution, we will not entertain any in-person visit from outside. We've completely shut down any external electives. And I used to get fellows wanting to come and rotate in our programs, and residency applicants wanting to do observership, and all of those external students or trainees, they're completely shut down. And I didn't think that will open up timely for this program season in my institution. There might be some institution that are doing some limited visits, which I don't know the status in every other place.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Nepani, for making that clear. So Dr. Gimire, is your program allowing any in-person visit, or what is your strategy right now?
I think we were completely shut down a few weeks ago, but we have started electives for medical students. So, and I think there might be a possibility if somebody wants to come and visit, there's a possibility, but again, depends on the local situation, local positivity rate, and where the person is coming from. Actually, if you're coming from the high positivity rate to low positivity rate, that may not happen. But it is, again, as Dr. Nepani said, it's going to be individuals, institution specific. But that means it does not necessarily need to happen, but just tells you that you're showing you the interest. I think that may or may not happen, though.
Definitely, showing the right intention is itself a step forward. Definitely, thank you. So I'll hand over mic to Rajshree, and she will continue the questions for our internal medicine program directors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chatur. Now, I'd like to ask questions to our residency program directors regarding the residency application components and the evaluation of the applicants. So some of the applicants think that the chances are favorable this year, and some don't think the chances are favorable. They are debating whether the USCs and LORs would be overlooked or undermined or not. So I'd like to ask this question to Dr. Charlie Say. As you may know that the Step 2 CS exam has been suspended and temporarily substituted with the Occupational English Test, also known as OET. So I'm posing you this question that now that the Step 2 CS is suspended and applicants can apply through different pathways, how will they be viewed? Would the programs overlook the CS since the ECFMG has given the equivalence to the OET this season?
Yeah, I mean, you have to rely on all this, during these difficult times, you have to rely on these, professional organizations like ECFMG. And if somebody has had, temporary certification through ECFMG through different various pathways, they could have chosen, any one of the 5 pathways. For us as program directors, what you look into is a candidate ECFMG certified. A lot of us would probably not even look into the process or the pathways that led to that certification, because as said before, these are unprecedented times, so we'll have to work with what we have. So I don't think it will change much. As much as somebody is ECFMG certified, you apply for the training program and you'll be viewed the same, whether you are certified by completing your CS or whether you are certified through through different pathways from the ECFMG. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chalsi. Would you like to add anything further, Dr. Joshi?
Yeah, I think I agree with what is said. Yeah, ECFMG certification is the thing to happen. Otherwise, your application will not be counted. Other things to boost the applications would be, do not do mistakes, grammatical mistakes in the personal statement and other component of CV, that kind of things. Be careful what you write, and you got to be able to talk through what is written in the documents, because you never know where the program directors, what they will read and what they could ask. Sometimes questions could be surprising too. So you should be ready for surprises as well. But if you are very prepared, then surprises may not happen. It may be a good thing for you. Thank you.
Thank you for your insight. I think this would surely encourage a lot of applicants to apply this year. So now I'd like to ask Dr. Joshi, as you said about personal statements, I would like to ask you that what do you specifically look into a personal statement, and what should and should not be included in personal statements?
Yeah, personal statement is the definition of who you are. So you got to write what is special about you, and what defines you essentially. So you do not want to write too much of flowery language too, and you do not want to write the common generic things, because I came across with the Nepalese applicants last year. A lot of applications have written earthquake. That was the thing, everybody wrote it. So yeah, you could write it, but do not indulge on it. So right now there is a COVID thing. So we may be thinking too much about COVID. So there is a COVID fatigue. So you do not want to indulge on that. So make something different, make something in some way that you could sign, and try to write the things which other people would have appreciated, so that those are your strengths. If you remember, oh, I did this, and my medical professor really, he was very happy with me. Probably write that, because that is your strength. If you have done some other activities other than medical activities, extracurricular activities, which are good, please write that. And make your personal statement to express yourself, who you are. That's it really.
Rasri, please unmute.
Yes. Dr. Jasi, would you like to add further into this?
Yeah, no, as Dr. Joshi mentioned, I think, a few things, right? You should make sure that there are no errors, grammatical errors should not be there at all. And stay away from controversies, don't put, issues of the race, religion, politics, these would, these would be deal breakers. Nobody would want to even look into your application further. And it applies to everything you put down in your CV and personal statement. Put things, genuine things, true things, things that you have truly contributed at or participated in, because, some of the other program directors and, the faculty would have learned a way to identify things where they would ask more questions, clarifications, and you should be able to defend yourself, based on what you've expressed in the personal statement or things that you have mentioned in your CV. So it is important to pay attention to a few of those things as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi and Dr. Chalisi. I agree that your personal statements reflect highly of us as a candidate, and it helps us tell our story and highlight our achievement, and also show our genuine interest to the program. So moving on to my next question, I would like to ask this question to Dr. Chalisi. In this current situation, now that the embassy is closed and the applicants cannot get visa to travel to the US, and moreover, even hospitals in United States are not providing any clinical or research opportunities to the IMGs. And how will this affect how programs view our applications? Will the home country count as a positive point, and whether new ventures like telemedicine carry the same value?
Yes, once again, this is a unique situation that we are dealing with. So, I'm guessing a lot of other, almost all the programs do have their own objective way of, score and kind of, evaluating and scoring, the entire application as well as the interview process. And if that system includes US experiences or clinical or research opportunities in the United States, that probably will have to be taken away from the program perspective as well. But having said that, telemedicine is definitely one thing that, that will probably add to your overall, application, because that's what we are dealing with right now. We actually have to have, several sessions, faculty development sessions on telemedicine itself here. So that would definitely add. Few other things like, so that you have some extra language skills, could be English, communication language skills and a formal training on that. And it could be Spanish. There are a lot of, training programs in the largest cities here in the United States, who have a lot of, Spanish speaking population, so that you have that extra language skills there. Research experiences, even in the home country would count. And I'm aware that there are more and more opportunities back home actually, over the last several years now. And especially in this COVID-19 era, I think some experiences, especially voluntary experiences in helping with the situations, back in Nepal itself with the COVID-19 situation, adding all those things to your repertoire would definitely help, kind of counterbalance or help with the application, since you do not have the US clinical experience.
Thank you, Dr. Chalisi. So Dr. Joshi, what is your take on this?
Well, do not have the gap time between your graduation and getting the new job as a residency. Don't, because gaps are not considered good. So to try doing, as Dr. Chalisi said, any voluntary things that are available to you. And the research activities, posters, they count a lot. So you could, if you've got some interesting cases, do the poster. We got survey monkeys these days. You could have questionnaires and do some kind of research on it, so that you could boost your CV. Not only boosting the CV, you could learn something from it. So if you do those type of things, program directors know that you are a dedicated person. You do not take things lightly, and you are, you dependable. You could trust on you. In other words, you could be asset to our programs. That is why, that is how program directors will see the applicant. Is this person would be good resident? Will this person pass the board exam? These are the questions that will arise in the minds of the program directors. So to satisfy those, if you are in the right track, then it is likely that you'll be a little bit different than the other candidates, and the odds of getting the residency program would go a little bit higher.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi. Dwelling more into research opportunities. And do you recommend a dedicated time period as a research assistant or research volunteer for an IMG before applying into a residency?
You know, what you do, I don't think that you need the time for that. You know, whatever comes, try to do it, because you know, to do research is very difficult thing. It is not easy thing. I'm not researcher. Probably Dr. Nepali will put light on it because he has more research experience, and maybe Dr. Ghimire, maybe Dr. Chalise. You know, I'm not a research person. I'm more of a teaching attending, I will say. I will define myself that way. But if you've got research experience, that is a positive thing, in my opinion.
So would you like to add more into this, Dr. Chalisi?
As Dr. Joshi mentioned, I think, as an applicant, you should not be spending one more year just doing, research, let's say, an added degree in research. But, for example, you apply for match, you don't match this year, you have to apply next year, you have a year in between, what would you do differently? And you have had all kinds of other, clerkships or observerships, you finish your training. I mean, it's that would add, getting an opportunity to be a research assistant and do a year of research, in a well-known university setting, and would definitely add to your CV. But having said that, I do not recommend people to spend 1 year, even, just for the sake of, getting a research degree there. Thank you.
Thank you for answering that, Dr. Joshi and Dr. Chalisi. Now, I'd like to move on to the next question. So, Dr. Joshi, I would like to ask you some questions about another important component of our residency application, which is a letter of recommendation. So my question is, what is a strong letter of recommendation? How can it be obtained? And what do program directors look for in a letter of recommendation?
Yes, they do look at the letter of recommendations, but how long they spend the time, that is the matter of debate. So because you may have a lot of applicants, it is very difficult to look at everything. So the letter of recommendation, usually, they are good. Letter of recommendations. That is what my experience of few years of interviewing is, that they are good. In fact, they are so good that sometimes it is hard to believe that that is real. Okay, so if somebody is willing to give you the letter of recommendation, that means it is otherwise the person will not give you the letter of recommendation if they don't want to write. So regarding whether you need the you need the LOR from the American attendings, US attendings, if you have, that is good. That is positive point, certainly. But if you don't have, that doesn't mean that your application is not good. If you ask me personally, I would give more weightage to the CA test results than the LORs.
So, Dr. Chalisi, now I'd like to ask you, what do you specifically look for in a letter of recommendation as a program director?
And letter of recommendations are definitely important, but as Dr. Joshi mentioned, we tend to see all kinds of letter of recommendation from people who have done 2 weeks of observership in a setting, and you get all full of praise for that candidate without having much of interaction. We all know how observerships would be like, or clinical clerkships would be like. So having, we take that into account when you're looking into LOR, just because it is from a US clinical experience and it's a 2-week observation, observership LOR may not count as much or as higher as somebody you can get from one of your professor back home, with whom you've worked for several months, worked in different projects, worked in different clinical setting. You have had clinical interactions with that, have had shown how your communication skills are, all those things. I think that letter of recommendation would probably have more weightage. But having said that, as Dr. Joshi mentioned, it all depends on in my spectrum of objectively weighing all the applicants. Where do I put the LORs? Is definitely after the USMLE scores, after the years of graduation from medical school, after their the communication interpersonal skills, their interview performance, then probably LOR would come in there. So it probably is not as a high weight as, at least and I can speak for most of the community-based programs. And for international medical, I'm talking about, by the way, when we're talking about here is for the international medical graduates. We're talking about the American medical graduates, there's a different story there. But for the international medical graduates, considering how LOR is written here as well as back home, we take that into account. So probably it's not as heavily weighted as a lot of other objective parameters. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your valuable insights, Dr. Joshi and Dr. Chelsea. Now, I have a question for Dr. Joshi, which is another issue faced by applicants this year, with chromatic centers being closed and OET centers having multiple cancellations. And getting dates have been really difficult for applications this year. So with many test centers still closed, we can see that a lot of applicants would be applying late into the cycle. And one of our attendees further add that if I'm not ECFMG certified by October 21st, can I still apply for this year? So is it okay to apply late into the cycle?
There are two types of selection processes in the residency program. One is the out of match or pre-match. The other is match. If you are applying for the match programs, you could apply at the last day and could potentially get the residency program. But if it is pre-match, then you are like you got to apply a little bit early, so that because these are first come first served basis pre-match programs. They may have some seats available later on, but the number can shrink significantly. So it depends upon where you are applying. So it is important to know what kind of offerings they do, the residency programs. For example, our residency program in Chicago is a pre-match or out of match program. And Dr. Chalice, I think your program is a match program. So, so you got to take that thing into consideration.
Dr. Chalice, would you like to add anything into whether applying late is okay for candidates?
I mean, it definitely puts you at some disadvantage, right? When you're talking about, residency applications from IMGs, we're talking about, like for, almost 5,000 applications for 20 positions. So, and a lot of the programs actually, use the different screening filtering mechanisms to, kind of, take away, let's say, a couple of thousand from those applications, screen through. So it's, from the program perspective, I probably can take, 20 out of the first 100. I'm just giving you a hypothetical example there. So if you apply late, you definitely are at a disadvantage, because a lot of times programs would have, because it takes a long time, for all these applications to go through, review the application, schedule interviews, get the faculty ready. I mean, it's a long process. So, the later you apply, you definitely at a disadvantage. Having said that, do you have chance? Definitely. That's why it's a match, right? You still have a chance if you apply late, if you get an interview, you are at the same boat. I mean, you still have good chances of matching. But
Thank you for answering that, sir. I think this must be a big sense of relief to many applicants hoping to apply this year. So moving on with my next question. This question is for Dr. Chalisi, and this is from our future USMLE aspirants to our panel here regarding how important are the STEP scores? When can 8 to 40 be better than 8 to 60?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question actually, and to tell you the truth, actually 240 is as good as 260. I think as an applicant, I take it that way, and actually it can be better during the interviews. That's when you present yourself. That's when you demonstrate your passion, you demonstrate your very strong communication interpersonal skills there. So it can be, and if somebody has 240 plus score, I know there are a lot of programs, they have their own scoring screening parameters where they may not even interview people with less than 240, but a lot of times the scores are definitely the most important objective parameter that from our program, from the program perspective that we have. And so they are very important, but it can be, I think it doesn't matter whether it's 240, 250 or 260. It probably will be in the same boat, as long as, but you can actually even go ahead to 60 plus candidates if you present yourself well, if you do well in the interviews, and then if you have a strong letter of recommendations, if you have a strong personal statement, if you can demonstrate that passion for internal medicine and the desire to grow and learn during a training by your by how you express yourself in the personal statement, in your CV and your interview performance. So you can definitely be higher than 260 even if you have 240. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chalisi. I think it is true indeed that the good score goes a long way. So attendees, please add your questions to the chat box. We are collecting questions from the Facebook and the Zoom chat box as well. And we'll try to answer after we conclude the session. And this concludes my questions on residency application. Now I would like to hand over the mic, or virtual mic, to Dr. Chatul.
Thank you, Rasri. So switching gears, I would like to ask our program director for fellowship, starting with Dr. Ghimire. So how is the fellowship application process different in terms of their USMLE scores, their chief residency year, for example, how the personal statement is reviewed, and sometimes applicants take some time before they apply for fellowship. So could you shed some light on this, Dr. Ghimire? And then I will ask same questions to Dr. Nepani. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chatot. I think more or less the important aspect of application, they actually overlap with the residencies also. We talked about score, we talked about personal statements, but for us as a fellowship directors, we are in a little bit of a easy situation that we have people coming from residency programs within the US. So our assessment, the parameters, the LORs are all US based, so we can rely on that LORs. So that is important. And regarding the second question about how much gaps should there be in terms of residency and fellowship, the sooner the better, but just you have a delay does not mean you don't have a chance. It depends on the context. What was the delay about? If you have a really good personal reason for the delay, many people, the IMGs, they wait until they get a green card. And I think that is a reasonable, but you don't want to stretch it out like 5 years, 6 years. Okay, so the longer you are out of the fellowship, the people look at it that you have developed or you have morphed into a certain kind of a working habit that might be a little bit hard to break when you come in as a fellow. So the longer you are out of the fellowship, the difficult that gets. Other than that, applying early, I think we talked about the personal statement. The personal statement, in my opinion, should reflect your character more than your achievements, okay? So your achievements are already in your application, your score, what you did, research and all those things, but who you are, internal, your soul, your character, how you handle with your difficult situation, how you deal with your conflicts. I think those are the things that we look in the fellowships, and fellowship is a little bit more of a scholarly and research oriented educational Then residency, I would say residency, the research doesn't matter. Scholarly activity doesn't matter as much as in fellowships. But in fellowships, even if you're going into a pure clinical program, that scholarly aptitude needs to be reflected in your application. So some amount of publication, I think it is imperative that you work on some case reports, abstract during residency. It does matter to many programs. More research-oriented programs will look more into a significant amount of publications. But other than that, I think more or less the things that we talked about during residency also matters. The score kind of probably goes down a little bit in not as important as in residency because we have these other parameters to assess in terms of your scholarly activities, whether you were a chief resident, resident of the year. So it really counts. If you really want to go into fellowship, make an effort to be a chief resident because a fourth year chief resident will pull you up really high for fellowship. And I'm being in California, I just wanted to say that different states have different state taste for foreign graduates. In general, California is not that IMG friendly, but if you really want to come up higher, then I think chief residency is absolutely, that's what we look into, more like a chief residence, resident of the year, that kind of awards, and some kind of award in your medical school, because California is not that IMG friendly. So those are the aspects that I look into in our California programs.
Thank you, Dr. Kimere, for your useful information. So I would like to pose the same questions to Dr. Neopane, including how competitive these programs are. With your experience in your program, please give us some insight from your side.
Sure. So the competitiveness, I'll quickly show you a couple of PowerPoint slides here and try to highlight the competency aspect of the training program. So basically we're competing USMD, USDO, IMGs that could be citizen or permanent residents of the United States, and IMGs requiring visa. I broadly divided in four categories. The hardest one is the last one, IMG requiring visa, and I think that's what the majority of our applicants that we're trying to provide information today are. So these are fellowship data. It's publicly available information. I just wanted to highlight that this is the trend in number of applicants through 90s through now. So it's going up every year. Overall, US medical graduates are increasing and IMG is increasing as well, and total numbers are high. So if you look at the program that I'm involved, hematology oncology program, where the lower line here shows how many people match, or the percent of the applicants. Roughly about 70 to 75% applicants match somewhere. The position to applicants ratio is 1.4 and 1.3 in various periods. That's pretty steady for the last 5 years, 1.3 to 1.4. Even though you look at there are 100 positions, there are 130 applicants, doesn't sound a lot, but 30 applicants will not find a position. But individual program, I have 4 openings this year. I received 370 applications, and that's the downside of applying for too many places, where a lot of candidates, apply to a lot of programs, and then programs get overwhelming number of applicants. The actual number is still 1:1.3 ratio. Similarly, look at other programs. I pulled out allergy, immunology, 1.21 and 1.3, cardiovascular 1.4, endocrinology is roughly about 1.1. If you look at GI, that's a little bit higher, actually 1.5, and most recent is 1.6. Nephrology, you have more openings than the applicants. So there are 0.6 applicants for each opening. Geriatrics, the similar way. Pulmonary critical care has 1.4 to 1.5. So these are rough idea where it's more competitive and where it's less competitive. And if you look at the mass data in hematology oncology, unmasked positions are roughly about like less than 5 every year. So most often it matches fully across the country, not just my program, but it's across the country. If you look at percent of IMGs or percent of US graduates in each of those fellowship, if you look at this column that I put this red circle around it, oval around it. So this number, cardiovascular, 53% are filled with US graduates. GI, 62% are filled with US graduates. And if you look at hematology oncology, 54 are filled with US graduates. This 87% is anomaly because hematology only program is very uncommon. So there are only a few places they offer. So it's only people who really motivated to specialize in very narrow area go into that. Pulmonary critical care is about 50%. So that's how roughly the competitiveness appears in the program. So I'm going back to a little bit about a lot of the other topic we talked about it earlier. Letters of recommendation, very critical in fellowship. And we review thoroughly. We try to read in between lines on those letters as well sometimes, because it's quite common. Everybody says, oh, so-and-so is good. I do get once in a while something that's very straightforward. It's not good. But many times people hesitate to write totally negative letter and they give some hint on the letter. So we try to read between lines. So it's very important how the letters are written and who has written the letter. If somebody is applying to HemOnc and all the letter is written by other specialty in internal medicine, there is nobody in HemOnc is writing any letter, then that may not be good. So out of 4, if I see 2 letters from hematology oncology, that looks good. Test scores still carry value. I want every one of the fellows in my program to pass the board. And we've seen a lot of research in this area that your USMLE scores correlate with the board passing rate. And when somebody applies for fellowship, those are the objective scores we have it. So we'll still look at it. High score doesn't mean that you're a stronger candidate, because your experience, your residency training, and your LOR helps a lot to screen who you are. Research and fellowship. As Dr. Gamer said, fellowship is more scholarly training. So intent to show that you have some interest of some research publication, reviewing, at least have good command on how to review a published research paper in the clinical areas. But we're not looking at and basic science papers to review, but in the clinical areas, those matter. And you intend some few case reports, and if you have opportunity to do more research, retrospective review, meta-analysis, those kind of projects are not too hard to find, and those will help. I've seen candidates in fellowship that have a list of publication that's 50, 60, 80. And when I look at the publication, I think a lot of other people do, and I look at what are those publications, and there were 60 publications of case reports. I really don't count that as a research and a scholarly activity. If you have 3, 4, 5, that's okay, but more than that, it just shows that you just want to increase the number. I will, in those cases, I look at more substantive researches. If you presented a poster in US national meeting, that carries a good value as a first author. That shows me that you really did work actually for that paper. You don't have to have full manuscript, but that shows that you're doing something serious work. So publication does matter. Few case reports, not too many. Chief residency matters, as Dr. Gimra said. That shows that your program identified you as a person with some leadership quality. That shows positivity towards your character, your leadership, and you're able to teach your juniors And fellowship is about not learning, but teaching residents and students as well. And gap time between residency and fellowship. So the other question we talked about is, as Dr. Gimri, I completely agree with Dr. Gimri's assessment that the sooner the better. There is no cutoff time when you're not a candidate for fellowship, but your chances gradually diminish. As Dr. Gimri rightfully said, that when you practice too many years, so you have that attending attitude and hard to adjust with a trainee again. And that's what programs worry about. After you've been attending for 5 years and go back to fellowship and adjust as a fellow, that might be harder culturally in your mind. So the sooner the better. Also, during that gap period, what you did matters. If you're applying for a more competitive program, and if you spend time doing attending whether you're a hospitalist or outpatient primary care in more like an academic setting, and you had a chance to work with some of the researchers there on parallel and publish some papers, that provides a great value. On the other hand, a lot of our IMGs and situation puts in the situation where you go to a rural area for your visa waiver, try to get your visa straightened out. For 5 years, you have no contact in academic center, but you did really good in rural practice and you apply for fellowship. That may not be that great in that case, that you don't have any touch with the academic place. So the gap matters, and also matters that how you spend that gap time. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer further questions.
Thank you, Dr. Neopane, for your insight and sharing those data. I'm sure by showing how competitive most fellowship programs are, that will help our residents to work harder. In my own program, we have 40 categorical internal medicine positions, and we get more than 4,000 applications because everybody applies everywhere. That's how the system is right now. So we can't do much about that, but it's a challenge on both parts. With this, I would like to hand over the mic to Rajshree and to continue with further questions on internal medicine residency.
Thank you, Dr. Chudod. We've been getting a lot of questions. Some of the questions will be covered up in the next segment regarding the step 3s and the pass-fail system of step 1 and PG trainings and year gaps. And we've also got some questions which we would address a little later. So moving on to the next segment. Now, I would like to ask this question to Dr. Joshi. As you may know that step 2 CS is one of the toughest exams for IMG, with pass rate of almost around 75% in IMGs, whereas in AMG there's a 95% pass rate. So my question is that do the multiple test attempts matter? And one of our applicants would like to further ask that if I fail step 2 CS, how can I make up for it?
Sometimes we put filters in the application process, and filters can be put, failure is out. That way filter can be put. But that does not mean that one failure is like end of everything. There are a lot of residents, a lot of people who got the residency program, and they are now working in their respective fields as consultants or hospitalists in the United States who failed CS exam in the past. So it is not the end of everything. So if you fail, try to pass other time and try to show that you are somebody to be trusted on, and make your application better by doing something else. That could be writing the case reports. As I was, research could be difficult for the residency candidate, but case report may not be. You could write the case report in the journals in Nepal, that is okay. If you could do in peer-reviewed journal, that is even better. You could do that. So again, trying is important thing. In the United States, they believe in second chances too. So, Mount Everest was not conquered in one day. A lot of people died on the way. So program directors know that people can fail, but they could be excellent later on. So I would encourage the people, people can fail because of very small, just, they could not pronounce the names, or some things went badly, they could fail CS, but they could try. So I will say that there is still a hope. Failure is not the end of all. I will tell that with a passion.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi. I think that is very encouraging for a lot of candidates who have been in such kind of situation. So my next question is to Dr. Chalise. So, sir, I'm currently applying for my Step 3 exams. And in your opinion, what is the importance of Step 3 scores while applying for residency?
A lot of programs actually don't even require, Step 3, as you may already know, is because it's most of the times it's required for visa purposes. Like, for example, if you need a H1 visa, you need a Step 3 that has been completed so that you can get a license and a visa for that. What actually matters more is you don't want to have the scores of 260s in Step 1 and Step 2, and then 190 or 200 in Step 3. I think that would actually send a kind of a negative signal, in the sense that you may have spent several months or even a year preparing for all this Step 1 and Step 2, and now Step 3 is actually a test that's designed for trainee in their first year of training, PG, postgraduate, your first year of training. So that's how the test itself is designed for. Having said that, you don't want to get into a situation where you score or do very badly compared to your other steps in Step 3. So it does matter in that sense, but for overall evaluation of the application itself, a lot of training programs do not look into Step 3 score.
Thank you, Dr. Chalise. So I guess the Step 3 has been gaining more importance lately, but it does not reflect much on how many calls you're gonna get, and how is it going to make a difference in your evaluation, unless you're scoring very less into it. Thank you, sir. So moving on to my next question. This question is for Dr. Joshi. As you may be aware that ECFMG has been kind enough to extend our deadlines this year from September 15 to October 21st. And we still have some time to work on our residency application. So my question is that what do program directors and the program look at? What are the major red flags in a residency application?
Earlier we were talking about the letter of recommendations. If you are surgical residency program, you did surgery in Nepal, and you would like to apply in the internal medicine. So if that is your situation, then you got to have the recommendation letters from the internists, right? Because you are applying in the internal medicine, and show that why you are applying for internal medicine, although you had experience in surgery. So that is one. The second red flag would be not explaining what you did, and you got a gap time. That would be second problem. The third problem is you are saying so many things in your CV and personal statement, but when you come for interview, you are not able to express it or explain it, or you are stumbling. That could be another red flag. So being very well prepared will always be helpful. So look, as the fellowship program directors told, that they read in between lines. So they may ask you, somebody wrote in application that they have 4 dogs, and I was interested what kind of dogs they were, and I asked the candidate, and the candidate was fumbling, and that it was just that was not real. So it was completely unrelated to the qualification of the candidate, but it appeared that that was not real. That is one of the experience I had. So try to be authentic and genuine and sincere, because sincerity, integrity are counted very highly here.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi. I think now the candidates would be really careful as to how to project themselves in front of a program while they are selecting their credentials and planning for the USMLE journey. So moving on to my next question. This question was asked a lot in the chat box from many of our attendees here. And Dr. Chelsea, what do you think is the preferred time gap between the graduation and the residency application? How many years of year gap after the graduation is considered too long?
I mean, I don't think there's any objective number to say that this is a preferred gap as such. I'd say a couple of years, considering for IMGs, considering the process, having to come here to take the CS, different steps that they have to complete. And a lot of our candidates, I mean, they don't, do their steps during their medical school. A couple of years is a reasonable gap, unless you have something to explain that gap, and so unless somebody has another residency training in the home country itself, that might help. Otherwise, anything like, for example, a lot of programs and a lot of colleagues I've talked to, like anything beyond 5 years after medical school graduation is a red flag in any application. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chelsea. So now I would like to ask Dr. Joshi the next question, which is also one of the questions that was raised by our attendees today. And you also talked a bit about this earlier, about having a surgical residency prior and now applying for internal medicine. But in general, what is the scope of prior PG training like MPs outside US, and does a degree like MPH increase your chances in residency?
Well, if you are trying to get the residency program, that is why you are doing MPH, maybe that is not the right thing to do. But in case by chance you did not get the residency program and you have that gap time and you want to do something, that is welcome thing to do. So I will take that way. That may not necessarily increase the chance, but that may not diminish the chance if you have got MPH. But more important than that is, I would like to look at my intern, because the applicant will be intern, that the person is able to work in the team. Is the person dependable and trustable? What is the medical knowledge in that person? Usually we don't ask medical questions, but some programs may ask medical questions too. So we look at those things. So that is how I will take, really. Not necessarily MPH or higher or MBA. If you have it, that is good. But that may not be deciding factor. However, if somebody has MD back in Nepal, maybe that guy could be a resource in the residency program. Maybe that is taken in a positive light. Personally, I would take that as a good thing in the applicant if the person has MD from Nepal. But again, with having MD, you would have spent more years. There will be gap between your graduate and when you are applying for the residency program. That is the negative thing to happen. So it is kind of mixed bag.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi. I think that really answers a question to the attendees who were asking about the prior PG training. So now, Dr. Chelsea, I would like to talk further about the residency application. And this question is probably the essence of our entire panel discussion. I would like to ask you, what do you think should Nepalese IMG should focus in general as compared to the IMG applicants from other countries? And what are the reasons our Nepali candidates might sometimes go unmatched? And what can they do to improve their chances next year?
Before I answer that, I'm very, very excited and happy to have a lot of international Nepalese candidates who come into an interview our program and who amaze me actually with their overall credentials, their application, their communications, interpersonal skills. I mean, it's amazing to see how far they've gone and how well they've been prepared. And I see one of the most important thing is, especially, is the interview skills. Once you apply to a training program and you get an interview, you get a interview, it's going to be your game. The ball is in your court now. I think how you present yourself, everything starting from how you talk to people, how you interact with them, how you express yourself, your body language, your eye contact, your handshakes, everything matters. And then a lot of times, I think a lot of people, including myself, during my application time, what we struggle with is the communication and interpersonal skills, and including the language skills itself is probably the most challenging part. If you're talking about the overall application and the interview process, challenges during residency is different. But I feel like I think there's something mentioned about somebody getting lots of interviews but still not matching. Is I feel my gut feeling is it's probably something to do with the interview skills or language or communication skills, because that's what would matter the most, especially at the time of interview. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chalsi. I think that's really encouraging to our candidates. And yes, we do see a yearly increasing trend of applications. So now the final question for this segment, I'd like to ask Dr. Joshi, what do you think would be the impact of changing the USMLE Step 1 scores to pass-fail system from 2023?
I was in the APDIM meeting about 2 years ago, and usually CK scores are considered highly for the application. So that is more important than the Step 1, but Step 1 is important as well. So try to boost CK scores, and I think pass and fail score would be okay. Thank you.
Rasri, if I can just add a quick note onto that. Actually, I think this is I know we're sort of time here, but I think this is the right time to kind of you are there, and I see a lot of forums, and I think if you can create a collaborative effort with the different stakeholders and try to at least have some structure and improvement in how MSPs are prepared in medical schools back home, I think that's going to help us a lot. And I think that will help the program directors here and the programs here look into candidates a little bit differently compared to IMGs, because MSPs need to have more, as I said, more structure. It has to be systematic. There has to be proper comparative grades, with comments, clock grades and comments as well. So if you can at least create a situation where we can standardize our MSPs with better structure, I think that would help. That would help mitigate, not having the Step 1 scores. And as Dr. Joshi mentioned, Step 2 CK score is probably the most important as far as programs are concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chalsi. I agree that uniformity with MSP evaluations would surely increase their credibility. So this concludes my set of questions on USMLE preparation and planning. Now I would like to hand over the mic to Dr. Chatur.
Thank you, Rasri. So I can see a lot of enthusiastic participation. I don't know how much questions we'll be able to take, but we are trying. So next question for Dr. Neopane. Quickly on fellowship, a lot of our international medical graduates have visa issues. How do you look J1 versus H1? And following this, could you please highlight some of the career opportunity in academic medicine? Now you are the program director. Not many people get into this kind of track. So could you briefly shed light on this, Dr. Neopane, and then I'll ask Dr. Gimire the same question about the career in academic medicine. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first is visa, and I do get questions and applicants with J1 and H1, both visas. And J1 visa sponsored by ECFMZ is much easier to go with and very predictable. When you complete your paperwork, July 1st, you have visa ready. The H1 sponsorship, a lot of universities, it's an extra work. You have to go through, there's potentially a cost involved that the employer has to pay the H1B fee, put the applications in, and the timeline is not as predictable as J1. So if I have a fellow want to work in July 1st, I don't want to take a chance on somebody I have uncertain visa situation in that July 1st. So because of that reason, a lot of programs and fellowship, they're not too excited to have H1s. It doesn't mean that chances are zero. It could be individual to individual. Somebody still might do it, but the chances are less. And J1 would be much more straightforward. So to do fellowship, I think if somebody is in H1 but really want to do fellowship, that's what the career goal is, then you should be willing to switch to J1 that show that willingness to programs where they don't offer H1. Or you have from different pathways, you have permanent residency that makes it straightforward as well. So that's about the visa. And I forgot the second question that Dr. Chato, you're putting into.
So basically, academic medicine, you are now program director, and how we should look that career.
The career goal wise, when you go on fellowship, it generally means that then you have some interest in a scholarly work, and it doesn't have to be, because a lot of people still, we need a lot of clinicians too to do the clinical work. And going into academic practice is one career opportunity you can always look. Still having a J1, that's a challenge actually. It's a difficult path, but not impossible. And you do a lot of research, publications, show interest in teaching and activities during your fellowship, and you can always find an academic place to work, and that will put you on the path of academic path. And within academic path, there are a variety of things you can do. You can do be a clinical faculty and focused on clinics and teaching, clinical teaching. You don't have to do a lot of publication. Some publication would be good. Clinical scholars, where your primary focus is clinical research. That is another path you can look at it. Clinical scholars, your primary path is medical education. Medical education program director, and that path is one path. The other path is in the medical schools. Medical school, medical students teaching, curriculum development, and that path is another path that, if you're interested in medical education. And probably relatively uncommon path for our IMGs is as a clinical scientist path, where you have a clinical degree. A lot of people even come with prior PhDs and or at least have substantial bench research experience, and you can go through the training program where further advancement is offered in those areas, and you can take a clinical scientist path where you have your active lab, fully funded, grant funded lab, and also you have clinical time where you see patients and participate in clinical trials. That's another path. So all of those paths are open, where you just have to have passion and interest to go on any of the path. And it's possible with the right passion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nupani. I'm sure this will encourage a lot of our trainees to get into academic medicine. So Dr. Gimire, what made you go into this academic track, and can you shed some light on this?
Thank you. I will just add one comment what Dr. Nupani said, and then I will go back to another thing. People might think research is easy, okay? So research track and that track is easy. Clinical, seeing patients, I'm too busy, stressed out. Actually, it's the other way around. Research track and getting grants and academics is much tougher than just seeing patients and going by your daily livelihood. So that is a little bit of a clarification. So I wanted to add one quick point on actually related to residency. Just wanted to give a field how residency applicants have changed in US. Since 2006, there has been 29 MD medical schools added, and there have been 12 DO schools in US. So that dramatically increases the number of graduates, US graduates. And there are already American US citizens going to Caribbean. So the field as a whole looks actually very adverse for foreign graduates. Actually, the US is producing a lot of their own graduates. So that is one perspective. The second perspective about Nepalese particular is that since we were never colonized by Western civilization, our cultural sensitivity towards Western culture becomes a very critical part when you come to US and you have not intermingled too much in Western cultures, because the word choice that you make to describe certain aspects of people's appearance, or when you engage in conversation, your choice of the words actually matters a lot. And I can give you one example. A very good candidate came in for an interview, saw the program director's picture in the website, and when he was talking to the program director for the interview, he just said, "Oh, Doc, you back then you looked so fat." Okay, so in Nepal, that's fine. But that's the cultural aspect of how you express yourself. Okay, that part, even Indians do not lack that because they have been exposed to this Western civilization. But for us, that's completely a new deal. So getting yourself accustomed to that new culture is also a little bit important, trying to spend some time after coming here and doing a few things. So that is the one part that I want to bring up. A second part about the fellowship H1 and J1, and I don't think there is any major program that actually sponsors H1 for fellowship. I think there might be very few, and they may not be the best place to go for training. It's mostly J1. And if you're already on H1 and you want to switch to J1, because we had a similar situation here. We had a very good candidate who is in H1, wants to switch to J1, but we realized that it's not possible after doing that after the match. You have to switch that even before the match, because after the match, when you start that process, you don't have enough time to switch that, and there is unpredictability whether that will happen or not. If you want to do that switch, do it while you are already on H1. I don't know whether that is possible or not, but we want that J1 switch when you are already applying or coming for the interview. So that is one. University versus community program. There is nothing wrong with community program. It depends on how rigorous your training was actually. So when you come for fellowship is more of a scholarly endeavor, okay? So we want a person who is already well polished, rigorous in clinical training. So if you had a community-based program, very well training, good size community program, you trained very well. Actually, we want that kind of a candidate who have been trained very well. It does not necessarily have to be a university program. So just training in a community program does not rule you out for a fellowship. And I think you should not hesitate in applying. It depends on how strong your residency was and whether you had achieved any significant milestones or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gimere. So I will pass on mic to Rasri, see how much questions we can squeeze in. So I will say we'll have next at least 10 minutes or so time. So let's try to wrap up our questions. So please go ahead, Rasri.
Thank you, Dr. Chatur. We've been getting immense amount of questions, and some of them were already addressed previously in the session. And in case our attendees, if they had missed it out, you can always go to the NRNA Facebook page, and they have a recorded session of today's panel discussion. And you can always go rewind, go back, and just try to see if your queries have been answered. So a couple of questions that were not addressed during the session so far is, this is a question to our program directors from one of our attendees. And the question is, can we apply to both categorical and prelim programs? And Dr. Shashi, would you like to answer that?
Okay.
Or Dr. Joshi, any?
Yeah, I just start. So the answer is yes, you could do it, but you need to. You could do in both. Yeah, you could.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
basically, you need to be clear about what you're looking into program. Preliminary medicine is a 1 year. Quite similar to a categorical PGY1. But what is your plan after that is going to be tricky. And a lot of these, the issues with the funding come up. For example, if you do a prelim in a year, and then if you want to get into a PGY1 in internal medicine categorical position, that can get tricky because a lot of this funding for the training programs, is for 3 years for medicine. So, it goes beyond that 3-year time limit. So your options would be limited. If you can get into a categorical PGY2 position after a prelim year, that would help. But the idea is you can apply definitely to both. And then a lot of the applicants do actually as a kind of as a backup, which is okay. But you should be prepared for challenges ahead, or what is your goal after that prelim year, and how do you want to address that? That's more important actually.
Thank you, Dr. Chalise. So this is another question from one of our attendees. I would like to ask Dr. Chalise, what is the difference of doing a residency training in a university versus doing it in a community program?
There are some, I'd say obvious differences, right? I think one of the things is resources for the training program itself. And then if you're trained in a university training program, and obviously they do have more resources. I'd say more resources for research, for scholarly activities that will, a lot of these university training programs would have their own fellowship programs, and it actually helps you create a pathway, at least some sort of, at least the opportunities are available. I'm not saying everybody who does, residency and training and university training programs would get into fellowship easily, but at least there is some structure. There's already some research activities going on. You can get into the system, into the structure, and then, get along with the, with your, further career plans. For example, if it's fellowship, there's, and then, as I said, the resources, the opportunities for scholarly activities and the chances of getting you into fellowship position would probably be some of the few differences. Having said that, community training programs, we have had, produced all kinds of, graduates from our training program who have gone, all over the world, all over the United States, and have gone into the most competitive fellowships as well. A lot of it depends on the effort you put into a training program. But the bottom line is training programs actually provide you a structure, a curriculum, faculty, training, a site for training. But what you get out of that training is actually all dependent on you. So it all depends on what you put into that training. But there are definitely some differences between the being trained in a community and university training program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chalise, for answering that question. Now, I'd like to take the last question from, there has been a lot of questions, but because of the time crunch, we've been answering it through the chat, in the chat box. And this is my last question. This question is for Dr. Neupane. So you've talked a bit about H1B and the G1 pathway through the fellowship. One of our attendees is asking about what is the usual pathway for fellowship for someone who had a residency in H1B versus through a J1, and with someone who's going through this pathway, do they usually wait for the green card and then apply as an applicant, and how much time in general does this process take?
So the H1 makes it a little bit harder, as Dr. Gemiri also mentioned, that switching to H1 to J1, and when you do it, and how hard it is to switch after the match, it adds up extra layers of complications into getting a right visa. A lot of places don't do H1 visas for fellowship. Like my program, we don't consider H1 visa candidates even for interview, because I know I'm not going to offer them position. And like a lot of residency applicants, a lot of fellowship program directors probably even put filter on H1, to be honest here, that So you don't even see the H1 applicants. So it is a difficult path when you're already an H1. If your goal is to have long-term and green card and citizenship and stay in US, then I think waiting shortest possible amount of time to get that green card would be the right path to apply for fellowship. But as I said earlier, what you do in that gap time matters. Your continued commitment for scholarly activities, your research, academic aspirations matter when you apply with a couple of years of gap in your training program. And my suggestion to all of you who are in the residency and thinking of this gap is try to join a program where there's some academic opportunities. You're teaching internal medicine residency program, and also you have sub-specialty programs within the system you're working, and try to do some level of research, whether it's a retrospective reviews, meta-analysis, or there are a lot of the national database. In cancer, we look at something called SEER database, and we review those and get a lot of very valuable data. And you can do, as you're working as an internal medicine physician, you can do a lot of those things on your side. And quite often this research question has come up earlier, is research time is important. And talking about the same context here, clinical research is not something you shut down your shop and start doing research. It goes in parallel with your clinical practice. So a lot of people who are involved in clinical research, you continue to practice as in your specialty, whether it's an internal medicine or subspecialty, and continue research on the side. And that's what I would suggest. If you're working as an internist, continue to do research to apply for fellowship. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neopani. I think that clarifies in much more details about the pros and cons of both pathways. So, Dr. Chattoth, we have been having outpouring of questions, and how much time do we have, or do we address it in chat?
We have less than 10 minutes, unfortunately. I know there's a lot of interest and enthusiasm, so we'll have to answer some of the questions in a chat box, I guess. So, and some of us can give our information, and then we can get in touch. And at this point, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Aditya Joshi. He's a pediatrician in Wisconsin. Actually, he's very relevant to our program because he runs this program called Ask AVA. That stands for Ask Available Physician. So this is a brainchild of Health Foundation Nepal, which is doing great work in Nepal. So we'll have the link to his program at last slide, otherwise other links. So those were some of the resources will encourage our program attendees to attend. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Satya Chaudhary, who is co-chair of this conference, for putting everything together, and Mr. Rupak Lamichhane, who is behind the scene, coordinating all these things. In the last 5 minutes or so, I would like each program director to spend a minute or so about a couple of take-home points for the candidates. So if we could start with Dr. Chalise, so that our applicants will benefit further, and we'll go in sequence, Dr. Chalise, and Dr. Joshi, Dr. Neopani, and Dr. Ghimire. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Chattoth. All I can say is aim high. I think it's important to aim high, and your dreams do come true. There will be hassles, there will be difficulties along the way, but I think as long as you aim high and be open-minded. Somebody asked about community and university programs. Apply, do your own research, apply to all kinds of training programs, and prepare well. I think a lot of it. I'm glad that this panel discussion might have at least highlighted some of the important points. But you have to prepare well for the interview. Work in your own groups, and I think and learn to accept failures. It's okay if you fail one of the attempts. Learn to accept failures. Learn from your mistake. And I think it's important to be true to yourself, true to who you are, and as long as you can project that into your application, your interview, the things that you put into your training, that will relate into achievement of your dreams. That's all I can say. I think those are important things to keep in mind. And thank you once again,
Dr.
Dr.
Charles.
Chittor, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I'm sure many of our participants are expecting to see you at least virtually during interview. Thank you. Dr. Joshi.
Yeah, thank you. You know, but there is one thing I left out, and I'll just tell that about the preliminary posts that was asked before. Please ask the programs about whether it is equivalent to PGY 1 of internal medicine program, because a lot of time they go to PGY 1 because there is not much of a chance, you know, to increase the chance people do that most of the time. But some people may want to go to neurology and other physical medicine and rehabilitation. They do that for that reason too. So asking that is very important because PGY 1 as a preliminary position, in the internal medicine program, you need outpatient experience, which PGY 1 with the preliminary uh, type may not have. So asking that is very important. Again, my take home message is be positive and try to it is not that if you fail or if you don't get residency, that's it. So maybe that kind of feeling, negative feelings should be taken out of the scene so that you are more confident. So that you are more of your own, you are not daunted by those challenges, although that will happen. Again, be very careful, be culturally competent here. When you do communication with the program coordinators, be very careful and be nice to them because program directors are going to talk with them. If in case they say something of negative about you, that may not go good. So that is my final advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for that nice and positive message. Now I'll move on to Dr. Neopani.
Thank you for this opportunity to communicate with a lot of our candidates. And I think I will just wish good luck to everyone. And I don't see this year as any worse than prior year for getting chance in residency. I think everybody's in the same playing field. A couple of things I would highlight again, as Dr. Joshi said, be nice to program coordinators. In Nepal, we have attitude that you don't have to be nice to admins or secretaries, but that doesn't work in this process. You have to be nice to everyone. And there are good examples, and even in my program that we have taken out candidate from the list of rank, were very favorable ranking because of the feedback from program coordinator. And be nice and show your professional behavior, even if you're meeting with the other co-residents, which it may not happen this year, but any other year that you go for a tour with a group of residents, don't make any off-note comment that doesn't go well with a lot of people, because that could be reported to the program director and that matters in your match. Be polite with everyone. And one good example I gave you is, there was a program in-person interview, and one of the faculty or program director went to restroom. There was a candidate. As a candidate, you don't know the faculty, but as a faculty, you know the candidates who is in the building just from their look. So went to restroom, came out, the candidate was in a restroom, came out, program director one, usually, you use soap water, wash your hand, candidate did not wash hand, just came out of the restroom, which is, it's a lot of problem with particularly men, don't tend to do that in our culture. So that simple thing, he was out of the list. I know it was a simple thing, but it was a very important thing, particularly in the year of COVID, that how important it is to follow the healthcare guidelines. The people who want to do gap year and work and as an internist and go in fellowship, one other thing came in my mind is, if you're looking to do research, you do data retrospective review or meta-analysis or the national database reviews, and you collect data, gather data, prepare a manuscript, and figure out people expert in the field around the country and approach them. Can you please review my manuscript? You ask them, take their advice, review manuscript, put them as co-authors in your paper or senior authors in your paper when you're working on. And that will give you some positive points, excellent fellowship, where it shows that you're able to do the networking with people who are in the field, and networking is extremely important in academic medicine. That's all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neopane. I remembered one quote from His Holy Highness Dalai Lama, who said, "Be kind whenever possible, and it is always possible."
Always possible.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Gimre.
Thank you, Dr. Chatot, and thank you, everybody, for those excellent comments. So, no, I just have to say, choose your specialty according to your passion. Just don't choose because of your lifestyle. I think ultimately, when it comes, everybody has to work hard. There is no easy way out, okay? So if you're looking for easy way out, there is no easy way out. Every specialty, everybody works hard. But choose your what you want to do, your passion. That's about specialty. Second thing, when you go for the interviews, don't be a goofer who's just sitting out in the corner, not engaging with anybody, and also don't be a chatterbox, talking too much. You need to show that you can engage in conversation with people who completely you don't know. At the same time, you have to be professional. And the other thing Dr. Neopane mentioned about building your portfolios when you are working in your H1 visa is very important. You can always get involved in a society's small committee meetings where you do the networking, and you will be surprised how happy people are to help you when you actually approach with your plan. I have this data, I want a little bit of help on this. You will be surprised. And I was surprised myself when I approached one of the big person in my field, and she accepted it, and I have a publication with her. So you will be surprised how people are ready to help when you are prepared. So remain engaged in scholarly activities in between that time, and engage in committee work in your society.
Thank you, Dr. Gimre. The right kind of engagement is the key. So now, Rajshree, you are representing hundreds of applicants here. You have all these suggestions, all these take-home points. Tell us your take-home points and your message for your fellow colleagues who are listening, participating now.
Thank you, Dr. Chatud. This has been truly an enlightening session for me, very productive. And I guess I can call it as a great way to address how virtual interviews will be. I think I've been primed a little bit more. So yes, residency is tough, but getting into a good residency program is equally tough. And the insights provided today, I couldn't have got anywhere else, and it will surely help me plan more effectively and efficiently. So once again, I would like to thank our panelists, Dr. Chalse, Dr. Joshi, Dr. Neopane, Dr. Gimre, and our moderator, Dr. Chatot, and the entire NIRNA Health Committee team, IT specialists who have been working in the background for making this a successful and productive session. And talking about the talk-home takeaway messages, yes, post-interview, how are we going to approach the program? Those have been addressed, and I couldn't have found those information anywhere else. So those tips, they were really helpful for us to understand what the programs are expecting from us prior in our applications as well as after the interviews. So those were really helpful. And do's and don'ts, the red flags, they were addressed, and we surely make a note of it and try not to make those mistakes while we are applying for our application. So overall, I'm truly grateful to our panel here for sharing so many information. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajshree. So in last 1 minute, Rajshree will be uploading slides for resources for applicants. And I take this opportunity to thank the Global Health Conference Committee of NRNA and our distinguished panelists, Dr. Shyam Chalise, Dr. Tilak Joshi, Dr. Prakash Neopane, Dr. Anil Gimre, and of course, Rajshree. and we all appreciate your time and effort. And I wish all the candidates good luck. And hopefully we'll see you, some of you virtually and then in person when you come to train. And Rashri, please upload that last slide for us. And that will conclude our session. We'll so that for a few 5-10 seconds, and we'll conclude the. So NRMP, the matching program is one resource. ECFMG, of course, and American Medical Association has an IMG section that is actually accessed online. And Ask ABA, the Health Foundation Nepal, the mentoring program. We'd like to encourage people to approach them. And NEGM has a lot of resources. So there are a lot of important information. Choose your information wisely, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and conclude, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.